or can be leaning on the advice of other people, whether it's people in the arts or friends and family and what they're saying. You can get all of this different advice and actually not know which way to go, and then just feel really lost with your art and also your art career.
Welcome to BenchTalk, the podcast where I dive deep into conversations with inspiring artists to unveil the secrets behind their creativity, along with discussions and behind-the-scenes insights into the realities of building a professional art career. I'm your host, Tom Gerrard, a professional artist from Australia and the co-founder of Art Career Academy, where Claire Bradshaw and I help emerging and established artists build sustainable professional careers. If you'd like to support the show, you can subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend who needs to hear it. This helps us keep the podcast going and is much appreciated. Welcome to the episode of BenchTalk. I'm your host, Tom Gerrard. This week I'm sitting down with Claire Bradshaw from the Art Career Academy once again, and we are unpacking another area of the artist journey and the art career and the art world in general. And the subject we're tackling today is just receiving unsolicited advice from people regarding your art career or your creativity, or just people like to add their 2 cents in, and sometimes it can really derail you. Like, I know that I've personally experienced this a lot throughout my entire creative life, and I've witnessed a lot of other people experience this stuff as well. And it can be really confusing when you've got conflicting ideas coming from, different people, and all. It can just be very heady for you. You can lose sleep over it. You can be very set on your path going towards the career that you envision for yourself, and people can say things and derail that path for you. So we just want to talk about this to, just help artists deal with this when it does happen, because unfortunately it is rife and it will probably happen to you at some point in your career. So hi Claire, thanks for joining us again. Great to have you here.
Yeah, great to be here. Great to be here. And I love this topic. I think it's a really, really important one. And I think that because the world is so much noisier than it has been, it can really throw artists off, and they can kind of like spin a little bit. And Tom and I were talking a bit about this before recording today. The impact that this can have is it can lead artists to either go into a place of freeze and not really know what they're doing and why they're doing it, and get really kind of confused, or feel like they're kind of like spinning around but not feeling truly connected to themselves. And something that Tom and I know to be true from Tom's art career, but then also from the work that we've done together in supporting artists, is your power is really when you connect to your center, when you connect to your authenticity, and then lead your art and your art career from that place in a very noisy, distracted world. And just to kind of add a little bit to that, some artists can find themselves looking externally to themselves, looking at trends, looking at what other people are doing, and then try to kind of replicate or emulate that, or can be leaning on the advice of other people, whether it's people in the arts or friends and family, and what they're saying. And what can happen, like what Tom was saying, is you can get all of this different advice and actually not know which way to go, and then just feel really lost with your art and also your art career. And what happens with that? Your creativity and your creative expression gets dampened. And we don't want that to happen to you. So that's why we're tackling this topic. So, Tom, from your perspective, give us some examples of when this has maybe happened to yourself along your art career, and sort of how you've handled it, but also, the impact that had on you initially, and how you kind of found your way back.
Yeah, it's happened a lot, as I've said, but I found I've handled it differently as I've, I guess, built my confidence as an artist. In the early days, I had a friend who, acted as a mentor, I guess, and he was, it was tough love coming from him. He was very opinionated. He expected more out of me than my creative abilities were at the time. And he never really said anything nice to me about my art. All he did was point it out, like, oh, that bit's crap, or, the colors are wrong and this and that and da. And it really knocked my confidence, to the point where I've almost had to cut him out of my life, because I loved art and I loved the act of creating, and that feedback really deterred me from wanting to be around him or create any artwork. And still to this day, that particular person, I sort of keep my artwork away from them and don't show them anything because I don't want to hear from him, really. And as I got more and more confident with my art, I started to take on, I guess, people's opinions, and people would say, "Oh, less of this, more of that, this and that," and I'd take it on as gospel, So I guess a big one for me was someone who was further along the creative journey than I was, told me that my art needed to be cleaner. I needed to get cleaner lines and really tight with my art, and their artwork is like really perfect. It's there's no drips, and every line is like pristine. And I thought that that's how art should be through their lens. But what happened is I ended up taking that on for myself, and I can't paint that way. I've got no joy in painting in that way. And I tried doing it for probably a year or two. I really applied myself in this way, and the art that I was making at the time was never quite hitting the mark because I was trying to get it perfect. And whenever there was one little error in there, it threw off the whole artwork. And I realized that I just needed to loosen up and just be myself and get messy and have drips and overspray and all this stuff that naturally happens through my creative process. And it helped me own my authentic voice a lot more. But then fast forwarding to recent times, I've even the last few weeks, I've had a few, unsolicited advice from people within the art world. Like one was from a gallerist, and the other one was from an art dealer, and they both told me to stop doing this and more of that, and it was quite annoying because I know that both these people have never put a paintbrush in paint in their life. So really, what would they know? Like, I know they are in the art world and they do have an eye for art, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're right. And it doesn't mean that they know what's best for me. But it sort of was really quite annoying because what they were telling me to stop doing is something that I really enjoy doing and enjoy putting out there as my arts. But one thing that really had me thinking about was like, if they're not in the arena, if they're not in the arena of making art, and they really should keep their mouth shut because what do they know really? But another thing that really threw me off as well is I had someone else giving me completely opposite information as well. This is all within a few week period. And it just starts to get a bit frustrating, really, because I'm quite clear on what I'm doing with my art and I know where I'm going with it. But I'm getting all this outside information. And another part that was quite annoying as well is the comments they were making, that none of it was positive. None of it was like, "I love what you're doing here. This is looking great." Like, I welcome that type of information, but it's all people sort of pulling me apart, and I'm not asking for a critique at all. I'm just, getting it, and it can really bum you out, I guess.
You can tell, Tom, there's still
Right,
a
there was a
little
lot there
going on here. So, so I think, when it comes to, because people do give their advice, and I would say that mainly it comes from a well-intentioned place, initially. Like, I don't think there are some people out there that say stuff because they want to pull you apart. I think, but for most people is because they want to see you do well, or if they're within the art space, they wanted to sell more paintings, right? That's probably, a lot of their intention. And so, I think as an artist, it's a very personal thing because, to have someone sort of say, "Don't do this, do this," da, da, da. Like, you're an artist for a reason. And one of the great things about being an artist is that it's free creative expression, right? So as soon as someone tries to box you in, it can be frustrating and it can be annoying. But knowing that most people is coming from a well-intentioned place. And I think the other aspect to this is that, like, the way that the brain works is that we have what's called a negative bias. So our brains tend to look towards what's not working, or where the holes are, or where the gaps are, versus what is working and what we love, right? And so when someone actually is coming to you and saying, "Don't do this," or "I don't like this bit," it's not from a place of criticism per se. It's more that that's the way the brain works. So I think if we can take away that I'm being personally attacked and take away some of that emotion, things can be like heaps better. But I also get, like this is your heart and soul, you're poured out onto a canvas, so it can feel like that. So I think, my piece of advice on what you're saying is that, to just take a little bit of a step back, take some deep breaths and put things into perspective. Because I think it can be tempting to kind of become reactive to feedback that you receive. So to Tom's point, we want to make this kind of like a bit practical. So, Tom's been very vulnerable and shared some of his experiences that he's had. And, we've spoken to so many artists who've had similar things. So the first thing is to just take away that kind of I'm being personally attacked. I think that's like number one, is just like, take some deep breaths, shake it off, like, let it go. Because, when we let that kind of I'm being personally attacked thing kind of be a story in the head, then we don't really go anywhere from that place. And then the second thing is really to look at who's actually giving the advice. So like what Tom was saying is like, if they're not in the arena, if they are not putting, paint on canvas, they're not putting themselves out there, they've not run their own business, like a creative business or anything like that before, then it's like, okay, well, thanks. But at the same time, they don't necessarily have the credibility or the authority to take on that. So you can be really nice about it and say thanks, rather than get reactive. But you don't. They're not necessarily their opinions don't necessarily carry a whole lot of weight. Ask yourself, do they know the art world, and do you respect their opinion? So, as Tom was saying, he's had advice from people in the art world, which is great, and you want that advice and everything, but knowing that their main perspective is they want to sell more art. Yeah. So they're also looking at things from more commercial perspective, not from, is this flowing out of this person and is it their truth, right? So, there's always that balance. There's always that balance when it comes to growing a career as an artist. And, do they have your best interests at heart? And, have they, what have they done in their lives? So asking these kind of questions can kind of help you to put into perspective. If it's your great auntie June who's giving you some advice on what she doesn't, what she doesn't like and what you should be doing with your art, does that opinion actually carry any weight? So yeah, I would start there. I would remove the emotion, shake it off, and then secondly, inquire, how much credibility, authority does this person have to be saying these things? And then the third point is then to connect inwards into yourself and ask yourself, what lights you up creatively? Where is your creative expression at? And, where are you taking your art and your career? And, I think that this is one of the most important things you can ever do, is to get clear on your vision and your values and these types of things. It's why we talk about it extensively in our program, Going Pro, and in our communities, because it gives you that connection inwards and that true north. So when you do get all of these opinions and distractions and things like that, you're not swayed from side to side, and it really helps with your mental health because you can stay true to what is right for you. So, because ultimately this is your career, this is your art, and you get to make the decisions as to where you take it.
Yeah. And just to follow on from that as well, like what I've noticed is when I do get advice unsolicited from people within the art world, and if they're people who I work with, like say a gallerist or an art dealer who I'm working with, and they're saying don't do that, like I'll just go, all right, well, the paintings that are in that vein, I just won't send any of them their way, because it's obviously not what they want. So it is actually good to have that feedback instead of giving them something that they don't want to receive. But I guess it's just strengthening your resilience to take criticism.
Yeah,
Because
and know that it's not personal.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it's funny, because it's like they're talking about the art, but I take it on like they're talking about me and my
Mm,
soul. You know what I mean? It's like my self-expression. So,
yeah.
you know, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why for, for artists are sensitive people, right? And
Mm,
you are putting something out into the world that is a part of who you truly are, which is super vulnerable, super vulnerable. And so if there's any ounce of criticism or don't do this, do that, it can hit really hard. And I think that's where that kind of like, it's not personal, putting that kind of little shield on is really important.
mm,
Is really important. And I know that, like, for Tom and I do little bits of, artwork, but I'm not, that's not my career. And, Tom and I, like, sometimes I will be like, "Oh, what about this bit here?" And da da da. And I forget to say to Tom, "Hey, would you like any feedback?" And to also ensure that I'm giving feedback on what I really, really love, the aspects that I love, and then ask questions about other things rather than going straight in there and go, "What about this bit? What about that bit?" When he hasn't asked for that. So that's something that I've had to learn. I don't always nail it either, but I think that these are really important things for both creatives and people who work with creatives or are around creatives to know about.
mm,
Hey artists, listen up. If you're committed to your art career, you're done with waiting for opportunities to kind of magically find you, and you're ready to start to actually build a sustainable career from a strategic lens, then we've got something for you. Tom and I are going to be running the Going Pro Bootcamp over 3 days. It's completely free, and we're going to be starting on Tuesday, the 10th of February. We're going to be covering things like vision, voice, and visibility. Basically, these are the things that you need to go from a place of feeling a bit stuck, scattered, unsure of in your art career to a place of more clear confidence. And this is the exact same framework that we have used to help our community to land solo gallery shows, to secure 5-figure commissions, to land media opportunities and build their sustainable careers. And you can access all of this for free. So all you need to do is head to artcareeracademy.com/3-day bootcamp or click the link in the notes to save your spot. Let's make 2026 your year for your art career. Let's get back to the episode.
I think the big group of artists who are really in the firing line of this, artists who paint in public, like so who are doing murals and things like that. Like I know through personal experience from doing a mural, you're 10% of the way in, and you got some random passerby saying what's going on here, and it's not looking that good. Gee, or da 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 da, and it's like, hey, just let me let me do my job, And I like to compare an artwork to baking a cake. It's like, it can even be, all the ingredients can be in the mixing bowl and all that, but it's not a fully decorated cake. It's still got to go through the process to get it there. And I just keep, I usually tell people in that situation, it's like, hey mate, it's an unbaked cake. I haven't put the decorations on yet. Just let me go through the process. When I explain that, they usually go, oh, okay, I get it. Come
Yeah,
back tomorrow, have a look then.
yeah, for sure. And I think
Yeah.
to be an artist that really stands out in the market and artists that, really create a name for themselves, you are going to be a bit like Marmite. Some
Mm.
people are going to really love you and other people aren't. And that's the way it is. And as soon as you start to make everyone happy, because this is where, it can go into almost people pleasing of trying to make everyone happy, that's where you can actually really dull your light and go into a place of becoming more beige, and not being really known for anything and just being very like, oh, that's a nice painting. But
Mm.
that it doesn't create any sort of emotion or something that gets people going or become noticeable and yeah, something that people like are attracted to or repelled again creates conversation. And yeah, what do you think about that, Tom?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think artists should set out to make artwork that everyone's going to like.
Yeah.
I'm sure, you know, Pic- when Picasso started painting like that more abstract portraits, people would be like, "Oh, but you know how to paint. Why have you got two eyes on one side of the face and the nose on the other and all that?" But that's him owning his style, and I'm sure he would have had a lot of critics then, as like Matisse did when he started doing his cutouts. Everyone said he'd lost his mind and he'd started painting like a baby, but it actually turned out to be some of the strongest work he ever did. And you can you imagine if Basquiat had someone saying, "Look, put some more like photorealistic elements in there because you look like you're painting like a child right now," or, and if these people were to take on this criticism, like they wouldn't be the creative geniuses that they are. They wouldn't have made the work that has gone down in art history, really.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, for
yeah,
sure. And
right,
something that we always talk about, in our kind of community is about, take what resonates and then leave the rest.
exactly.
Like it's sort of like take it in. Is that something that, I agree with or not? But
Mm.
don't feel like because someone said it, no matter who they are, that you then have to do it. You need to filter that through yourself first.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess like in closing as well, I'd like to sort of say if you are in a position where you are giving advice on someone's artwork, I would I would always recommend highlighting on the parts of the artwork that you really like, all the positives. Say this part over here is great. I love the colors you're using. I love the format, like this and that. Because what you're doing is you're building that person's confidence. Where I'm sure there's areas of that artwork that you don't like, but if you focus solely on them, it's going to have a completely different impact, that conversation, and they're going to walk away like maybe not feeling inspired to create. So just consider that. I know there's a lot of artists out there who have shared studios and all that type of stuff. So if people ask for your feedback, be nice.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And,
Yeah.
if you are an artist who's kind of more, either early stage or emerging, and you're in that place where you're experimenting a lot and, you're putting your stuff out there and, all of the stuff that comes up when you start to become more visible, make sure that you're around a community of other artists, other creatives who are doing the same thing and putting their work out and being vulnerable. Because people who are in the arena, they get it and they wouldn't pull you apart, and they will be an incredible support for you as you're navigating all of the things that come out, or that you feel as you're putting your work out there and growing your career. It's super important, and we know a lot of people who haven't had that, and then they get one little bit of criticism and then they disappear and then they don't touch a paintbrush for years, and we don't want that to happen to you.
Exactly. All right. Well, anything else to add there, Claire?
I think that's it. I think we've covered it off. We'd love to hear from you if this resonated with you or you've got something else to add. We love hearing, what you're getting out of, the content that we're putting out there.
Thanks for tuning in today. If you love this episode, I'd really appreciate you sharing it with an artist friend who needs to hear it. Word of mouth is how we reach more creatives like you. And if you're ready to take the next step in your art career, head to the show notes and grab our free resources. They're designed to help you build momentum and clarity on your creative path. Until next time, keep creating.